It was my first time sitting courtside ever, which was such a cool experience. And I decided when I found out that I was going to be sitting, in a place where cameras would be getting us constantly because we were right by the players. I was like, okay, this has to be an opportunity to blow up the plunge. And so I did a few things. I was like, I'm going to bring a plunger with me. And the TV stations are going to see this random fan who has a plunger courtside, and they're going to start talking about it, and it'll lead to interviews, and they'll have to figure out who was that plunger guy. Like, that was the story in my head. And so I was like, I'm going to bring a plunger. But then I was worried I wouldn't get through security with a plunger. And so I put together a goodie bag of plunger, toilet paper, paper towel, because my view was, I'm going to get to security. They're going to be like, sir, what is this? I'm going to be like, I just ran to the grocery store and I'm going home after the game. And this was just what I bought there. Turns out, by the way, I go through the security. They didn't ask a single question. They literally just grabbed the whole bag and the plunger, put it through the scanner, and it was totally fine.
God.
What's up, everyone? I'm Alex Lieberman.
Yo, this is Jesse Pujji.
And this is The Crazy Ones. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Crazy Ones. We're doing things a little bit differently today. Jesse and I have been having a lot of things just go on in our lives with work, with life, with travel, and we figured it'd be fun just to have like a powwow without it feeling scripted, without it feeling like a show. Jesse, what do you want to say about it?
Well, you and I haven't caught up. And so I think, and then the other thing is, the best feedback we've gotten from these is when people are like, hey, I just feel like I'm sitting in the room and you guys are catching up and talking. And so I was, and I'm not a big prepper, I think, as Alex knows. And I was like, let's just get on and talk. Let's just see what happens. And so this is the no episode or something like that.
Yeah.
So dude, catch up. I feel like I haven't talked to you. I feel like I haven't seen you in several weeks. I talked to you. I was on spring break with my family. There was like lots of whatever. We haven't caught up. So I've seen all this stuff online. You've been plunging left, right, and center. So catch me up.
Shilling plungers every day of my life now. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on. I would say in terms of just like stress levels and like feeling of balance levels, like I would say stress, I'm typically very low stress. Like I'd say my average is like a 2 out of 10, which was very different. Like 4 or 5 years ago, my average was like a 6 or 7 out of 10. But I would say the last 3 weeks, month has been like a 5 out of 10. And my feeling of balance and like productivity around the things I want to work on has felt lower than I'd like it to feel. And I think that's just a combination of a lot of travel. I had my bachelor party, then I went to South by for a talk. I was in LA this past weekend. I'm going to Chicago tomorrow, and I'm going to Miami next week. And I'm not someone who likes travel. I'm like a homebody. I like having my routine. And at the same time, right, like doing the podcast with you, 60-second startup. There's like, transition in the workflow for 60-second startup with editing. The plunge, it feels like it is the early days of a business that you constantly feel like you're behind and you're trying to catch up.
Right.
I had another business idea.
How do you know when you're
that
stressed? What are the signals you have to yourself?
For me, well, when I like really feel anxious, I actually feel a weight. Like I feel pressure on my chest. I wouldn't say that I'm actually there. What's creating stress for me, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, is that I like feeling like I'm in a routine where the day before or the night before a work day, I've like listed out what I'm going to do. I have my full schedule. Right. I do the things I say I'm going to do. And I feel like I haven't had the ability to really do that in 2 or 3 weeks, which feels really shitty because almost like the feeling of disorganization. When I feel disorganized, I don't feel good.
The chest thing, like, are there other signs to yourself? This is, by the way, one of my favorite questions that my coach introduced me to, which is like, we oftentimes say we're stressed, we're happy, and he's like, well, how do you know? And it's like an awareness, a self-awareness thing where it then teaches you, and I'm like, oh yeah, when I do this, when my brain starts to go down this path, or when my body does this thing, that's when I'm feeling this thing. And so I just think it's a great question. Like,
Well, I think also to that question, I think to your point, it's like we create stories of the things that create stress for us. And so we may
Right.
create stress even if we don't actually feel it. Like for me, another thing that I'm feeling is like I'm not getting nearly enough sleep. Like my perfect spot is if I get 8 hours and I go to sleep around 10 or 10:30.
Right.
But for the last several days, it's been like 11:30, 12 o'clock, still waking up at 7. And like a story I have in my head is when I do that enough days straight, I'm just not as sharp. I'm not thinking
Right.
clearly.
But is that true,
But
or do you wake up foggier? Like, is the story, or are you actually noticing physical sensations or like
I,
unarguable things?
I definitely woke up with physical sensations, say, like I woke up feeling tired. I woke up like, I snoozed my alarm. I woke up with a little bit of a headache, which was weird for me. I don't typically
Right.
wake up with headaches. By the way, this is also an area that I'm naturally self-conscious about, the area being like feeling sensations and awareness of emotions. Like
Yeah.
one of the stories I've always had for myself is like I don't feel deeply. I don't have like strong emotions. Like,
You're a type
I
7.
envy yeah, I envy so much my fiance who she feels so deeply. Everything, like she cries a lot, she laughs a lot. Like her range feels like a
Oh
negative 10
wow.
to 10, whereas
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
range feels like a negative 2 to 2. And, I think it's even stayed with me in life when people have like called me a robot because I seem unfazed in any situation.
Huh.
So when you ask that question, that's actually what comes to mind is like, it's actually hard for me to always identify what physical sensations I have when I feel stressed or not in like a perfect flow state.
Right. Do you internalize it, or do you just not feel it? Do you know?
I'm not sure if I feel it, but like it so quickly gets put into my subconscious that I don't have the consciousness to be aware of it,
Right.
or if I literally don't feel it. And so, yeah, it's something, I haven't seen a therapist in a while because it's one of those things where it's so easy to go to therapy when something's wrong, but when things are like fine, you end up getting out of the habit. And that's like the mode I'm in right now. But this is when I was last with my therapist, like this is something we spoke about all the time was like, how can I start getting more in touch with having an awareness of like what I'm actually feeling? And one of the things she always told me to do is like when I was feeling any emotion, sit for a second, like pause,
Yep.
stop what I'm doing, and spend like 30 seconds or a minute just describing to myself what I am
Totally.
feeling because it builds up that muscle of awareness.
Yeah, when I'm with my coach, I'm talking about like being nervous or scared or maybe sad about something. I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm sad," and then and I'll start talk. I'll jump to something else, and he's like, "Oh, hold on, like, be with this, Jesse. Like, be with it." And it's actually like really hard for me. My wife has been seeing a coach, for a variety of reasons, and like on Sunday she saw her, and like her type and my type are funny enough, not compatible at all in like the broad strokes things. Nor are our astrology signs, which is kind of funny.
You guys are defying odds in terms of astrology and
Yes,
enneagrams.
yeah. And but like it was interesting because it was like, she's a type 2, which is like the helpy helperton type, and she feels, she'll feel her emotions deeply, like you're saying. And I apparently push away negative or like bad emotions. I just don't. It's like, and it's hard for. I said the same thing you just said to her. I was like, I don't know when I'm not feeling, like when I'm suppressing them or I'm just not feeling them. Like it's a
Yeah.
very subtle line for me. But apparently I do that, and then like, she needs someone to feel that with her to fully get the satisfaction of them. And she also doesn't, she's like prideful about being good at helping. And so if she's overwhelmed and I'm just like, hey, I got it, no problem, it like pisses her off more, actually, like her type or whatever. And I'm just trying to be helpful. It's interesting, just the dynamics of certain patterns and conflicts we have, and like just to actually get behind them and understand them quite a bit. The self-awareness thing for humans, for entrepreneurs especially, I think is like the most important thing.
Well, it's funny because this whole thing about how do I know I'm stressed, like a self-consciousness around my feeling of stress or like feeling of emotions. We talked about it in the past, but it's very relevant today of how it bleeds into my work life and building businesses. Because, for example, one feeling that I've had in general, but specifically with the plunge right now, is because I don't feel, or the story I have is because I don't feel my emotions deeply, it prevents me from feeling productive anxiety and paranoia that would lead me to be really proactive about building my businesses. And so like one of my stories right now is like, okay, the plunge is going live on Kickstarter in June. I know how many reservations we need in order to raise $300,000 on Kickstarter. It's like basically we need 400 reservations a week. Right now, for context, we're at 45. That is not good. And so what I'm saying to myself is like, damn, am I being proactive enough or am I not? Because I'm not feeling the stress of just how far off we are right now. And if I was feeling it more, we'd be more proactive. So like it absolutely bleeds in to how I think about myself as a professional.
You're paranoid about not being paranoid enough. Dude, come on.
Yeah.
Be a little nice to yourself. Come on.
Yeah.
You're paranoid. You're like, I'm not paranoid enough. I need to be more paranoid.
It's one of the things that I always worry about. Again, because I think that was something I've admired so much about my co-founder, Austin, is like he has a perfect, I consider it to be a perfect level of paranoia where like I've used the phrase in the past, like bomb sniffing dog of business. Like at all times, he's looking for what are the cracks that could be detrimental to our business. And again, these are all stories, but it's like that's what I always admired about him.
Do you know what his Enneagram type is?
No, I have to get him to do the test. I don't
Adrian's
think he
a
ever
type
has.
6.
And what does
type
that mean?
6 is like the warrior. She's like, she makes, she looks like we look at a candidate for a new job, right? We're looking for like a recruiting talent person. And I'm like, oh my God, look at this positive thing. Look at this positive. Oh my, you can do this. And she's like, well, there's this problem. And, I think what I would try to get your head around, if you can, is like your tendencies are your tendencies. And so are Austin's, and they can be very productive, like from above the line. Like if you're in presence, they're great. You have so much creativity and the ability. And when you're below the line about them or upset or feeling threat, like and I think the same thing's true for her. Like her tendencies they can totally debilitate her ability to be really, but then they're also great because she thinks about risk and she's like ahead of the next step, and when I'm unleashed, I'm not worrying about any of that stuff, which is actually not good either, right? I'm too crazy. I'm like too far out there, just like, woo, this is fun. And like your point around maybe you're not stressing enough, but then when it's integrated in a healthy way, you're thoughtful about those things that you're stopping. And like that's kind of one of my big learnings has always been that all of these things, again, just like everyone says, your best quality is your worst quality. Like it all just is kind of how you show up and being aware of when you're doing kind of the unproductive version of yourself versus the productive version of yourself.
How have you thought about like how much you need to work on, call it staying above the line and not being self-sabotaging with the things that also make you great versus just delegating out kind of where you have those weaknesses so they're taken care of without you having to build up kind of like your weak areas?
Yeah, I think I'll reframe the question a bit or the answer. Like, the more I do all of this conscious leadership, and even like some of it gets to like the levels of Buddhism and stuff, like the more I just end up in going, oh, this is all just, can you stay present? Can you stay above the line in the language that conscious leadership uses, which is really just saying present, meaning not making your choices and your decisions and you're holding meetings from a place of threat or a should. Can you just be in the open space of like one thing my coach will say, and I started saying it too, he'll like, there's no problems here. Like, hey, with the plunge, 45, that's cool. You have 45 orders. You made up that you want 400. Good for you. Why didn't you make up you want 1,000, or why didn't you make up you want 50? Okay, cool. There's no problems here, Alex. What do you want to do now? And you may want to go, you know what? I'm fine with the 45, actually. You may go, no, I have a couple cool ideas I want to get going. And you're choosing that from a place of sort of like, I'm not under duress or threat. I'm just choosing what I want. And I find that like, all of the other stuff falls away in light of that. And sometimes that means, okay, I think I want to delegate this because this isn't something that gets me excited. And but when I'm in the state of threat, which by the way, 98% of people are 98% of the time, like that's how we are as standard. That's part of our human wiring. We're constantly going, well, should I do that or should I do this? Or this is not my strength. Like, and we're living in this place of, I've heard another framework that's very similar to this. It's like, you're either in confusion or clarity. And it's very similar to above the line below. It's like, oh, you're either in confusion. Right now you feel a little confused. You're like, am I going hard enough? Am I not going hard enough? Like, you're in these circles, or am I in clarity? And from like, there's nothing wrong. If there was nothing broken, if you would just go, yeah, like by June, I hope to be at 400. I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday who reached out to me, who said, you seem like you've kind of gone through this transition, and he kind of had a similar version of yours, which is like, is he not, getting the most out of himself? Like, should he be working on bigger things? And it was an interesting conversation, and I've had similar thoughts. Kind of
Yeah, I was
everyone
gonna say you've
does.
talked about that in the past with like, why I think we were even talking about like, what Brett is doing with Figure, and you're like, I mean, that's like a huge swing, and you're like,
Yeah.
what am I playing too small with the companies within Gateway?
Yeah, totally. And I think we everyone has versions of those thoughts, or they're trying to like, am I going hard enough? Am I going big enough? And I think a lot of times that's just a form of threat for yourself, where you're using it, as a way to threaten, versus kind of just asking the question of like, what do I want? And what's
Yeah.
actually gets me up and excited in the morning. And, I think there's something to that. But on the plunge, you've been posting these videos out in New York, like getting people to do it. Talk about that a little bit. I'm curious.
Well, by the way, did you ever read that exchange that I sent you from the VC? Did I send this to you?
I don't know. Say more.
Okay. Basically, I was posting plunge videos, and I got a DM from an unnamed VC, and I recorded a short episode about this, and the message was basically like, everyone is cheering you on about the plunge. I'm going to be the one who says it as it is. You're going to look back 18 months from now and say you've wasted your time.
Wow.
And and I responded basically like, hey, I appreciate the feedback. And I was a slightly defensive, but also curious. I said, I'd like to know, like, how do you know that I'll feel regret 18 months from now if you don't know what my goals are, what my motivations are,
Right.
like any of these things? And the person said, fair, but I think that you are not taking a big enough swing, which is such like, again, it's so validating to the story I have in my head about being fearful of not taking a big enough swing. I explained to this person that, my goal after the Brew was like, just start with something that feels like total play, that I feel like I can learn and grow in an area of business that I haven't had the opportunity. And their belief was that this is a game. They were like, if you want to build an e-commerce, go either buy an e-commerce business. They're like, go buy a business that's already doing
Right.
sales in e-commerce. And I basically said, like, I don't find buying businesses to be particularly fun right now. And then they're like, well, at least pick a business that there's product market fit. Like, it's a category, that it's a behavior that already exists.
Right.
And all of this to say, we went back and forth, and
Did
the
you know him
conversation
well or her well?
I know this person, I'd say relatively well. We've gone back and forth on Twitter, I don't know, like half a dozen times, and I've had a Zoom call with this person once. I will say I left that exchange like feeling, it was a combination of feeling like frustration, anger, self-consciousness, and then at times being like, fuck this person, like I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now.
Right.
But the thing that really got under my skin was probably 4 or 5 days later, I put out a tweet basically about, and I've told you about this like content agency idea of ghostwriting for founders, executives, CEOs. And this person DM'd me with that tweet and just wrote, "There we go." And basically, I think what they were insinuating is that our conversation led to me going after a bigger swing. And so, that was, I would say, like,
that's a bummer. I mean, I went to Penn and Wharton, and so a lot of my friends are in finance and VC, and obviously, like, I had trained that way. I worked at Goldman, and one of the risks of becoming a VC, and just like any job, like this, having built a business, like I remember feeling this at Ampush once. I don't know if you ever felt this, but maybe 5 or 6 years in, I was like, wow, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, their brains must be so uniquely formed. Because I realized that I had been sitting in this seat, not because they started that way, but because just by being in a seat where you get this information and you see these trends, and these bright people are like, I remember after, we had 150 people at Ampush, I was, reporting in, I was like, all these clients, I was like, wow, I'm like seeing so many interesting things. My brain has been shaped uniquely by that. And I wonder, and one of the challenges with being a VC, or one of the risks, I should say, especially the medium-aged VCs, the super young ones don't know what they're doing. The older ones have like the middle ones, in my experience, it's sort of the hammer and a nail thing, right? It's like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So everything they look at is through the expected value of how big could this be. If I put $1 in, will it get a multiple over it? And there's a lot of, in my opinion, being right in that business. They have to be right, like, because that's just what, if they're wrong a lot, then they're not good at their job, right? They have to be right
Yep.
about the investments they make. And so then they start to kind of apply that framework everywhere to everything without the nuance of understanding somebody's individual goals or what matters to someone.
Totally.
And I think
yeah. I mean,
that's
the way that I've always thought about it is, if you were to build businesses as dictated by the way that VCs are taught to think, you would just permanently build enterprise level B2B SaaS businesses over and over
Yeah.
and over. And that may be right for some people, but it's not just like going to maximize enjoyment and joy for the people who are building the companies.
Yeah, totally. And I think like it's not wrong either, by the way. It's just not right
Yeah.
for every situation and every person and everything.
Of
And
course.
like, if it's not obvious that the plunge is kind of like a fun passion project for you, this person's also like, I immediately invalidate the perspective. I'm like, what? How do you not know that this is clearly a fun thing? Like, waste time. You don't need more money. I mean, you could have more, great, but that's not your objective, right?
Totally.
And so, yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, that sucks that people, come in that approach, but that is what it is.
It's
One thing you
interesting.
said,
Well,
I want to talk. Make sure we talk about that. I
Okay,
read.
and then can we talk about you a little bit?
Yeah, you wrote this tweet that was like, "I'm shameless." One of my great traits as an entrepreneur is that I'm shameless. I want to talk about that for a second. Like, what does that mean to you, and what do you like? What kind of advice do you give people around that?
Also, I wrote that tweet after being with your Ampush co-founder at the basketball game. That was the inspiration for that tweet, because what happened was, it was my first time sitting courtside ever, which was such a cool experience. And I decided, when I found out that I was going to be sitting, in a place where cameras would be getting us constantly, because we were right by the players, I was like, okay, this has to be an opportunity to blow up the plunge. And so I did a few things. I was like, I'm going to bring a plunger with me, and the TV stations are going to see this random fan who has a plunger courtside, and they're going to start talking about it, and it'll lead to interviews, and they'll have to figure out who was that plunger guy. Like, that was the story in my head. And so I was like, I'm going to bring a plunger. But then I was worried I wouldn't get through security with a plunger. And so I put together a goodie bag of plunger, toilet paper, paper towel, because my view was, I'm going to get to security. They're going to be like, sir, what is this? I'm going to be like, I just ran to the grocery store and I'm going home after the game, and this was just what I bought there. Turns out, by the way, I go through the security. They didn't ask a single question. They literally just grabbed the whole bag and the plunger, put it through the scanner, and it was totally fine.
God.
But what I also did is I
incredible.
printed out a massive QR code and printed it on my chest. And so I went to the game with all these things, ended up not taking out the plunger because I was worried the referee was going to trip over it, which honestly, I probably should have done that, because that would have been even better.
Amazing. That would have been memed all over the world.
It would have. It would have. And so I ended up getting 53 scans of my QR code, which is like good, not great. I thought I was going to have 0. I think the big issue is that the QR code gets blurred on TV, so I need a bigger, clear one next time. But after this, I was just thinking to myself, it's like, what are some of the similarities in like what I'm doing with the plunge now, and what I did with Morning Brew, and what I plan to do with any businesses I do moving forward? And it's like, I've just thought to myself, like, I'm willing to do things that people won't do sheerly out of embarrassment or a fear of getting in trouble. Not like in trouble by the law, but like just like getting like chastised. And I remember for Morning Brew, something that Austin and I talk about a lot was, we would put slips of paper down in the Winter Garden, which was the main area of the business school, every day. We did it every day for 3 weeks. We probably went through 5,000 slips of paper every day. And at the end of the day, you'd see them thrown out. And we got an email one day from the Ross Business School Venture Fund, basically saying, hey, we will never be interested in investing in your company because of your lack of respect for the business school commons. And I will say, in that moment, I did feel bad for like the people who had to pick up the piece of paper. Like, I felt bad about that. But in my head at the time, I was just like, this is what is being done to get people to use our product. Like, we have to do this. And so, yeah, it's just like, I've never shied away. Like, these things don't embarrass me. Like, it takes a lot to embarrass me. And I've found that to be an asset, because that is like an emotional threshold that people won't break through as they try to will something into existence.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a powerful thing. And, I think the fancy word for it, or, I'd say is being bold, right?
Yep.
Shameless bold. Like you're just willing to go and put something out there. And what's interesting, I think, is we talk about the type 7 and all these types and all this, everything. I've noticed across a lot of my entrepreneurial friends, especially the more successful ones, you could see it again, like Travis Kalanick and Mark Zuckerberg are very different personalities, right? But both of them were willing to like push the envelope to a point that most people would have probably backed off of at some point in very different ways, right? And same with like Mark Benioff, like, as a random example of Salesforce, B2B, like there is that common trait amongst entrepreneurs. And I'd say like any entrepreneurial trait, I think there are obviously some people who are more naturally inclined that way, but I think it's also something you can build. And it's funny because
Totally.
the CEO of Ampush, John, him and I kind of grew up together, and he always gave me a lot of good feedback. And he actually started like watching me, and he started kind of coining some of the things I was doing. So one thing he coined, which was kind of a funny one, was he's like, he was a big poker player. He's a professional poker player for 4 years. He was like, there's a thing when you're down in the hand and you're going to lose, and it's in poker. I didn't know this. It's called do anything. Pretend to go all in and then decide you're not going. Like just start to do something crazy to throw your opponent off. And he's like, Jesse somehow does like, deals falling apart. And he would say, Jesse will just like ask like, well, what if we bought your business? Like I do weird things like that. And he's like, and it changes the dynamic really fast in a situation, right? And that's like the do anything thing. He used to give me feedback that I was like, sometimes I came across as too commercial. And I was like, no, that's thank you for the feedback, but like, no, that's it. That's like, everyone knows where I stand. It doesn't mean I'm not a caring person. I won't be the first person to help someone get a job, but like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to cross that threshold, I think the other thing John mentioned, which I think was really helpful for Ampushers, we used to train this, is you got to kind of like, have you ever been punched? Like, have you ever been in a fight?
Once.
And like, they say this, right? Like, now that you've been punched once, like you could be punched again, right?
Yeah, because there's so much fear before the first punch of what is getting punched like.
And then once you've survived it, you're like, yeah, that's fine, whatever, right? Like I've gotten punched in the face.
100%.
And I think that's the other thing we tried to train people was like, you got to go take those bold risks, because even if they blow up in your face, to know that nothing, like you're still there, your body's still intact, like it's really empowering. And that's also what builds that muscle of shamelessness or boldness, which is like, you went through that, you went through security, and then you're like, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And I think, so it can be taught, but I think it's such an important trait for people.
Well, and to be honest, like I at least find it mildly addicting. Like I not only
100%.
Do I like not. It's like that fear of embarrassment. Once, like I was walking through security, my heart was palpitating more than it had palpitated in like months, and like that feeling was incredible. It's like the adrenaline junkie who skydives. Like that was that for me. And I think there's two things that you called out about being shameless that are really important, that make it possible or don't make it possible for people. One is like the way that John described you is like, you're kind of always thinking about what's possible, right? Like you look at this world of possibilities, and I think a lot of people will constrain themselves to kind of being the horse with the blinders on, where you have to run in one direction. But it sounds like the way your brain naturally works is you just keep asking what's possible, what's possible, what's possible. And maybe even you get more creative the more constraints are put around what is possible. And then the second is around like, I think people stop themselves from being bold either out of fear of embarrassment or fear of appearing like a sellout, like constantly trying to sell or shill something.
Right.
On the second one, like fear of selling something is like, my perception has always been, if I am selling something that I'm proud of, I am never going to feel bad or embarrassed about selling that thing, because I feel like I'm helping people, I'm giving them value. The second, which is fear of embarrassment, it doesn't even have to appear in like the world of bringing a plunger into a stadium and being the guy who wore a QR code on his body. I see this all the time with like creating content. Like when I ask people, why are they not creating content on Twitter or LinkedIn to build their brand? The answer is always, I know how valuable it is, but I'm worried I'm going to be judged for what I put out into the world.
Right.
And just to use like a small example, right? This like content agency that I told you about, like the way it even became an idea is I saw people creating content, founders and CEOs creating content. I'm like, they're not very good at it, but clearly they understand the importance of it.
Right.
What if I just, and Ankur from Teachable, who now is Ocho, he did this with Ocho. So I was like, I'm going to take a move out of his playbook. I basically was like, if you're a founder who's doing more than $10 million in revenue, you understand the power of building audience and you're willing to spend $5,000 to $10,000 a month to build up your audience so that you create business opportunities, DM me. I have a friend who does this. That friend was me. I got 50 DMs. So now demand is built in. So now if I want to do this, I'm just building into demand. If I was embarrassed about putting that tweet out, that opportunity would have never happened.
Totally. The other way I flip this on people sometimes is like, yeah, you're not that interested. You're like, so your content, like your problem is not going to be that people are going to see your content and judge you. It's going to be that your content's not very good and they're not going to see it. And like, but that's the reality of all these things, right? Like the more I've been doing all this TikTok stuff and barely gets watched, and like the hard thing is actually to get good enough content that people want to watch it. And when your content's not very good or not very interesting, it just doesn't get that much.
You're not going to even have the eyeballs to judge you.
Exactly, right? There's not even enough people. Not to mention, like, you're lucky if you break through the noise and people actually know who you are. And I wouldn't go to the levels of like some of these people who are clearly just doing it to be controversial. That's not my style. But I think like there is really that balance of getting judged. But I think that's like shamelessness as a, shamelessness or boldness, whichever you prefer, as a critical trait to both have as an entrepreneur or as well as develop as an entrepreneur.
This episode of The Crazy Ones is brought to you by ADP. Hiring and onboarding is expensive, but turnover takes the cake when it comes to cost. Luckily, there's a key to controlling your biggest business cost. ADP Total Source, the largest professional employer organization, or PEO. See how your costs, including turnover, compare to other companies with a free benchmark report from ADP. As a client, put insights into action with your own dedicated HR pro to advise on compensation strategies, pay transparency, and pay equity to help attract and retain employees. The result? PEOs can lower employee turnover by 12 to 14%. Take the free quiz at adp.com/thecrazyones to see if a PEO is right for you and get a free benchmark report. That's adp.com/thecrazyones. Ah, spring. The perfect time to refresh your wardrobe, your apartment, and that's right, your email marketing. Don't have time to analyze all those data points about performance or spend months researching new content strategies. MailChimp helps take the guesswork out of your marketing strategy. Unlike other platforms that just report on how your emails are performing, MailChimp analyzes real data from billions of emails that they send to provide personalized, industry-specific guidance. These data-backed recommendations can help improve your email content, subject lines, audience targeting, and so much more. Stop guessing about your audience and start targeting future customers with MailChimp's informative, personalized, and data-backed recommendations. Get started today at MailChimp.com/guesswork. That's MailChimp.com/guesswork. MailChimp sponsored this segment of the podcast. MailChimp is not affiliated with any other products, brands, or companies featured or mentioned on the podcast. This episode of The Crazy Ones is brought to you by Electric. One thing all business leaders know for sure, security is paramount. To grow with confidence and create your best work, you need to trust your work will stay protected and supported. And Electric is your go-to for IT needs, big, small, and somewhere in between. Access proactive security standardization across devices, apps, and networks, and rest easy knowing you have lightning-fast IT support at your service. But that's not all. If you complete a qualified meeting with Electric, they will send you a free pair of AirPods Pro. To qualify, you must be an IT decision maker at a US-based company with 10 to 500 employees. Get started at electric.ai/crazyones. That's electric.ai/crazyones.
Okay, I want to talk about you for a second because I know some things that have gone on in your life in the last few weeks, but not everything. One thing I know that you've done is you went to Shoptalk for the first time in a while. And it's funny because I would say 2 weeks before you went to Shoptalk, I basically put out a tweet that got crushed by some people saying that I went to South by and you wouldn't tell from being at South by that there's anything going on in the economy right now. I wonder if this is the best use of time for founders. So it seems like you had a different perception of Shoptalk. What was your experience?
Yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, South by and Shoptalk are pretty different. I've been to both now. Shoptalk is an extremely commercial place. I mean, there was a room that was probably 4 football fields in size, with little round tables with one-on-one chairs, completely filled. I'm talking like 1,400 or 2,000 seat, like
Oh
one-on-ones
my
going
God.
on every 15 minutes.
And
So
how are
it's-
those organized? Like, who's organizing those
that's
chats?
part of their magic. And there's actually these 2 founders. They're an Indian couple who are the kings of the conference industry. I've just heard this through the grapevine kind of, but they basically build these things up. They make them really commercial. Their secret sauce, from what I understand, is they basically essentially pay for the buyers to come out. So if you think about any conference, right, like Conference 101, like how do they become things? Well, there's some content that is valuable for people to be there, kind of. There's a bunch of people who, in every case, who buy something. And in the case of Shoptalk, it's the e-commerce businesses. It's the retailers and D2C brands. They're kind of like the buyers, right? And the sellers are the e-com tech businesses like Kahani, or pick your favorite one, right?
Yep.
Algolia, TikTok had a huge booth there. I mean, anyone who's selling anything to e-com. And like, I've been to all kinds of different conferences. I used to go to this one for Goldman that was, VCs and growth equity and CEOs and founders of private companies. And like,
Yeah, it's
always
a
a buyer and a
pop-up
seller.
marketplace.
It's always a real-time marketplace. And then so these guys really intelligently get the buyers. They basically pay for them to come out and even give them like a credit. And in exchange, they have to attend meetings. Like, they have to meet with people. And then they create this whole matching engine where you sign up for, so on. And one of the highlights, by the way, was Kahani did not get, we had a guy from Growth Assistant there and a guy from Kahani there. The Growth Assistant guy got 4 times the amount of meetings. And it was just like, one of my takeaways I wrote was like, man, these guys are tired. They need resources. Like, it's just very clear. You could get that feeling. But the one cool thing about the Kahani highlight was we got one meeting with Nike. And we were like,
how'd that happen?
Why did you want to meet with us? Well, because through this matching engine.
Yeah.
I was like, why'd you want to meet with us? And it was like the dream of every entrepreneur. She's like, I want to repurpose my social content on the site.
Oh my God,
we were
that's
like,
incredible.
Yes. And so that was a very big highlight. And she was like, well, Nike's really hard to do business with. Of course, I'm sure it'll take us a year, even if she's excited about it. But yeah, it's very commercial. And so, look, I think for any founders thinking about conferences, I think there's a handful of reasons to go. I think number one, far and away, and like I had goals. Like, I had a text thread with these 2 folks from the 2 companies.
Yep.
And I was like, on Sunday, I was like, what's our goals, guys? Like, I want you to, get 50 business cards and meetings set up. 25 meetings get set up from this. Each business gets 5 or 10 customers from this. And it's easy to kind of have the ROI. I want us to go find 10 people who we think are shortlisted for future recruiting. Which, like, you think about the best salespeople get to go to these conferences and stand at the booths. And I probably did rapid interviews, not obviously. But,
so smart.
what do you do? Tell me about the business. And I was out there. And then I was like, let's learn some areas. Like, let's learn some new things we didn't know before. And so those are kind of our goals. I mean, I think the commercial aspect of it, everyone's in one place, so lots of meetings can happen very fast. I think one walk on a conference room floor, like, I almost want to make it a requirement for Gateway X before we start a business. We have to go walk a conference floor in the industry because, dude, you learn so much about what's there, what's not there. You can kind of build a market map in your head by just walking on the conference floor.
What were a few of your takeaways from walking the conference floor?
The biggest thing that, industry or market wise was, dude, there's a bunch of 9-figure e-com tech businesses, none of which, like with the exception of Klaviyo and maybe Attentive, have anything to do with Shopify. Which is like, if you think about like the sound and the rhetoric on Twitter and other places, you'd go, man,
yeah, it makes you think that Shopify is everything.
And dude, there's a business for e-com. Every e-com problem you could imagine in your mind, there's actually a pretty big business building it. So I'll give you some examples. Like, one of my good friends is the CMO of Signified. And, Signified helps the Walmarts of the world with this challenge of, hey, someone comes and they're going to do a fraudulent transaction. I don't want to reject everyone. Like, just because everyone has a blue shirt, I don't want to reject them. I know that some people are 6'2", and they are actually going to be fraudsters. The other people aren't going to be fraudsters, and it adds like 50 basis points of margin to the business. And he's like, yeah, it's a 9-figure business. We have 2 other competitors that are similar in size, and we're not even 25% of the TAM of the GMV.
It's wild.
And I'm like, Shopify? He's like, whatever. I mean, maybe, I'm sure they do stuff with Shopify brands, but like that's not their, like this is totally random business of like fraud detection. Another random example that blew my mind was, I forgot it, Syndio. It's called Syndio. It's kind of a roll up.
Okay.
But like, you just think of a problem. Samsung or any manufacturer of any product, they have all these specifications. The new Samsung 10 QZ TV with these, they've got like, hundreds of retailers, Costco, Amazon, Best Buy. How do those sync to their product specs? You need a tech for that, right? So that's one of their big products, which is like the manufacturer changes their thing and they push it out via API or whatever to all these different things so that it can stay up to date and in sync at any given moment. It's a huge business.
It's wild.
And so, yeah, I think that was probably the biggest takeaway in terms of like broader industry learnings. And then in our sector, I mean, it's interesting. There was a lot of discussion about shoppable video and like exactly the trends you'd think. But there wasn't a lot of activity, like the same kind of thing we've talked about. Like the market doesn't feel like it's quite there yet.
Well, just to go back for 1 second to the first thing you said, which is you had someone from Kahani there, you had someone from Growth Assistant there, and you said Growth Assistant had 4 times as many meetings, right?
From the matching engine, right? So it's a good apples to apples comparison.
Yeah. So what does that tell you?
It tells me these guys need resources. Like Kahani takes resources, right? We need you to get your content up and running. We need to do a bunch of different things. Growth Assistant gives you resources. And I think that was just like one. It was like all these brands and these folks are looking for resources. I think the other big thing I heard a lot about offshoring, and I never really appreciated this, is like it's on everyone's list, but a lot of people are very intimidated by it, and they're afraid. They're afraid of language barriers, hours issues. They're afraid of low quality talent and wasting their time.
Totally.
And so there's like this hustly group of people on Twitter who talk about it all the time. But they're very much the minority. The vast majority of people go, yeah, I keep hearing about that. Gosh, I don't know where to start with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's like they meet this guy Kyle Boyd. He's like a Italian guy from Boston. He's American, obviously, right? Italian heritage. And he's like, don't worry about it. I've got these set up. And everyone's like, oh, okay, great. Like I'm going to go to you to get my offshoring. And so it is actually pretty interesting that it's on everyone's list, but there's sort of an intimidation factor. And seeing a company that does it, they all wanted to meet with them, and he just got a lot of meetings.
So I have one last question for you. Is like I know you're thinking a lot about like streamlining your calendar and like clearing things out right now. And you had mentioned earlier about delegation, and this is like a very big topic in my head right now because as I've started working earlier stage again, like on the plunge, I've realized, like I always thought I was great at delegating. I really thought I was like exceptional at delegating. And I've realized I think I'm actually pretty shitty at it. Like today, to my partner for the plunge, like I asked him if he could do certain things with our paid acquisition, like if he could start running our Facebook campaigns, if he could help A/B test our websites. And I was like holding on to those activities before while doing like all of our organic content and our ambassador stuff. And I was thinking about like, why have I been holding on to this stuff? And I think the big reason is one, like I completely overestimate how much I'm able to get done in a day. And I think two, for whatever reason, like giving up control of something I quote unquote think I'm going to be better at, even though I'm not exceptional at it, is something that I do. And so, yeah, it was like a big learning for me. I always thought I was good at delegating until haven't delegated well over the last month. Right. How do you think about within like your companies, like your threshold for delegation versus just doing the thing yourself?
The delegation is a hard thing. I think one thing that helps me is I'm pretty lazy. Like I just don't like to do work. And so I'm really good at finding out other people to do work. But that doesn't mean that also runs the risk. My risks typically when I delegate are more abdication related.
So by the way, that was the third thing that I was worried about, which is like, I fear that every time I delegate something, someone will be mad at me because they're going to be like, oh, he pushed this work on me. What is he doing now? That's always my fear.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I have that a little bit, but I mean, you're the boss. Like it's your business. You're in charge. I think I've kind of given up on that. Like that one doesn't bother me as much. I've realized people actually want that guidance and it's, you have that story in your head and they don't. They're like, I'm working for this person, I'm working for or with this person. And so I think there's like the laziness thing / other, like I think there's other spiritually things to try to understand your stories, like, oh, I'm afraid that they're gonna think I need to do more, or like whatever. And I think that's a big thing that people need to confront, which is before you think about any tactics and specifics, because there's like a pyramid here, right? There's like philosophical stories in your head. Are they going to judge me? Am I lazy? Am I,
Right.
what stops me from delegating? Do I think I'm better than them, therefore I'm not going? So there's all that stuff. So that's the first stuff you got to confront, in my opinion, when you're learning how to delegate. Adrienne, I'll pick on her again. She's like, she doesn't like to give up control. She has this thing of wanting control, and she knows it, and it's part of her thing. And so like she knows, and so that's the thing she has to confront, her need for control. So that's, everyone has different triggers around delegation, right?
Yep.
Then the next one up is I've written about this framework. There's a combo platter framework that I love to use called the leadership ladder, and it combos with another thing called task relevant maturity, which is a mouthful but actually makes a lot of
Okay.
sense.
I haven't heard of either of those.
So the leadership ladder is essentially, imagine a ladder, and the most basic level, entry level job, the person would say, "Tell me what to do, Alex." And then at the next level up, they go, "I think we should do this." The next level up, they would say, "I recommend we do this." The next level up, they would say, "I'm going to do this." The next level up, you're a CEO and you have a board, you would say something like, "I did this already. Here are my results, and here's what happened." And then there's maybe one, I forget, there's like 7 levels, but that's essentially
This is like what Jonathan Swanson talked about with like delegating to executive assistants, like is like the levels of by which someone is like has superpowers in delegation, where it's like first order taking, but at the end, I think he called it like nirvana, where they're doing things you haven't even asked them to do because they know that this is something you would want done.
Totally. And it's something that you build, you have to put in the reps, but like there is a thing of first assessing where the person is, right? And then from the leader's, perspective, it's actually, what level are you flying at? Are you at the, hey, go do these 5 specific things? Are you at the, what do you think we should do? What do you recommend we do? What did you do already? And asking, you decide kind of where to fly. And oftentimes where delegation breaks down is like, you're either flying too low. The person is at the, hey, I know what to do next. Stop telling me what to do, all these specific things. That's micro. Or it's the flip, which is like they need very prescriptive instructions, and you're like, oh yeah, just tell me what you did yesterday. And they're like, I need specific. And so we actually used it at Ampush, and I continue to use it to actually calibrate very openly. Like, where on the leadership ladder do you want me to be, and where do you want to be on this? Because that lets us have an open conversation about where to kind of hang out. And then there's a constant energy and effort, to your point, and what Jonathan Swanson said around how do you up level a person. Hey, you know what? You've been saying I think a lot. I would like you to start coming in with recommendations and tell me what do you recommend we do, and why do we do that? The other concept I talked about is task relevant maturity, right? And this is a really important tie-in. There are things that like, you and I have both sold a company. So if someone were to go, where are you on the ladder? We're probably in the middle. We're not investment bankers. We haven't done it so many times that we would be able to say, watch out, I'm going to plan the whole and run the whole process. But like, we could tell you what we'd recommend. We'd kind of know where to go next, And if we were mentoring someone who's never sold a company, right? Say Carolyn at Unbloat, when someone, she'd go, Jesse, tell me what to do at each step, because in this task, I'm not mature, right? And so there's this concept of by task, or, the flip of it is for doing inventory management, she's very high on the task. She probably knows more than I do about it, right? So the idea that I would dictate to her, or even I would just go, hey, what have you been doing? Oh, you reordered some and you thought we should double the order? Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. And so understanding, and again, making that an explicit part of the conversation, which in your case, you'd say, have you done Facebook ads before? Oh, no, I haven't. Okay, well, I've done a little bit more than you. So I think it'd be helpful if you tell me specifically what you're working on, and I'll tell you what I recommend you do. And let's iterate like that until we get to this point.
I love that.
And then so that's the tip of my little pyramid here. Should draw this. I just made this up.
I love it. You should post about this next, and then everyone's going to reference Jesse's pyramid.
Yeah, the tip of the pyramid is actual tactical things. So reporting, I'm a big fan of daily reporting when there's numbers involved. I'm a big fan of at least a weekly check-in for any major initiative that's going on. So there's certain like touch points so that you're not abdicating. And in those touch points, you establish that like anything is fair game. It's like hey, what's this going on with this number? Oh yeah, what are we doing to improve that? And so it's not like you're you've just said, oh yeah, send me the CPA once a week and we'll see if the Facebook stuff, you're sitting down and problem solving with the person, asking questions, pushing them in certain ways, as a means of sort of like building their skills and their development. And the review, I think review as a cultural thing is a really important thing because it's a way you can teach somebody through the process of review and feedback.
I love that. By the way, I just want to say I've loved this format of conversation because like selfishly, it just feels like if we were just like sitting having coffee at a coffee shop, we would have done exactly this. And so now we just get to do this, and then other people get to listen to this. So I love this.
And in classic Alex fashion, if you liked it, email us at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com and tell us if this format was better or worse, and then share it with someone.
And we're just going to finish with a startup AMA, which is where we take questions from all of you and we answer one or two of them each week. And so if you have any questions about whether it's issues you're dealing with in your business, priorities that you think we could be helpful with, as Jesse said, shoot us an email at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com.
Some things just leave you guessing, like why are yawns contagious? But you know who doesn't leave you guessing? MailChimp. MailChimp analyzes data points from billions of emails to offer up personalized recommendations to help you improve areas like email content and audience targeting. Get started today at MailChimp.com/guesswork. That's MailChimp.com/guesswork.
Let's just do one startup AMA before we wrap this thing up. We have a bunch of questions from listeners, and I'm scrolling through all the questions that Ray, our producer, shared with us. Okay, this is a question from a listener that says, at what point are people beyond the point of being able to create amazing startups? I know the true answer is never, but now that you also understand trying to balance family, kids, etc., and given that for most people, drive decreases to some extent with age, what do you think? Or alternatively, at what age does it become much harder for a founder to succeed? For example, I imagine a 55-year-old first-time founder will not exactly have the VCs lining up unless they were a partner at McKinsey. How do you think about your drive and motivation changing as you're getting older? And do you find yourself less motivated than you were when you were starting Ampush?
I find myself motivated by different things. My son, I sent my son and my father-in-law yesterday to a Blues game because my son like really wanted to get on the Jumbotron and like just like his my father-in-law's a huge
and he
Blues
loved the
fan.
first game, right? Like, didn't he have an amazing time?
Yeah, the first game he had this great time. We took him out early. He was upset that we had to leave the third period. His sister was there. We didn't want them to get not sleep. Last night we said you stay until it's over. He got home at 10:30, which is really late. His bedtime's like 8. He had a blast, and like that motivate, like, I don't know, I'm motivated to like give him unique life experiences. And so, yeah, I think my pure drive to be really successful and make a lot of money is definitely different than when I was 25. But I don't know that I'm less ambitious. I'm like more ambitious for a balanced life, if that makes sense, like a holistic experience and all those different aspects of it. I think to answer the question, I mean, look, it's hard for me. I kind of think I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur by the time I was 12, which because my dad was an entrepreneur. So I had this like unfair cheat code of seeing someone in that position and started my first real company at 25, which I think with kids and, it would have been really hard. Like we worked hard. We had no idea what we were doing. And I don't know, other than if you've been really like experienced in a business or maybe early on in another business, I don't know how you learn that, but maybe you do. Maybe at 55, you were the founding employee and the VP for something for 10 years. It really depends on where you're at. I think to come in cold at 55, I think it would be challenging. I'm sure lots of people have done it. I'm sure there's plenty of evidence that it happens, but I think it would be harder than if you have 55 is interesting, by the way, because you may be an empty nester, so it might be easier. There's actually the season of life between like
right.
30
it's
and
like
50.
30 to 45 is the hardest. And then like when your time starts to free up because your kids have reached maturity, it could be easier.
Yeah. Yeah. From a time and sort of obligation and where you may want to allocate perspective. But yeah, I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, more than 66%, like you're more than that confident, like do it as young as you possibly can. If you're not sure, some people get in 10, 15 years, they go work at McKinsey, they go do, and then they're like, you know what? I think I want to start something. There's nothing wrong with starting something at 40 with 2 little kids at home. It's, again, you have to solve around that. It's not something you can ignore. But there's nothing wrong with it. And I don't necessarily, I've seen people who are just as motivated by their families in terms of being successful as I've seen people who have find it a challenge to balance them. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And what I'd say is it's a very careful balance in understanding truly what's motivating you, because I think there are a lot of people also who say they're motivated by their families, but they end up spending no time with their families in service of trying to provide for their families, which I think can end up becoming a perverted motivation. I think you're spot on with the motivations changing over time. Like at the highest level, when we built Morning Brew, my motivation was, let's call it 60% money, 40% love for the game. Now I would say it is pretty, there's still money drive there. Like I think for me to say that I wasn't motivated by money would just be false, because I'm not working on nonprofits. I'm not doing things that don't get you to make money. But I'd say it's probably closer to like 70% learning and growth for myself, and then 30% making money today. And
but also I think for you fun is important. Like, it has to be the reason you're doing
being
the
fun,
plunge.
being fun, being playful, for sure. Like ways that I can act like a kid again are for sure a big piece of motivation for me. And then I would say, a question I always ask myself, because I didn't, have the upbringing you did, where like you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur for a long time. I didn't know that about myself. I more just saw myself as like an inventor or a tinkerer growing up. And so I always do have this question, like, how do I know if I truly truly love being an entrepreneur versus there's something else that I could love even more? Like, I don't know. And so something I've kind of made like a healthy rule for myself is, in my free time, trying as many new experiences and activities as possible. Because if there's some activity that really speaks to me, that I love so much, I shouldn't be inhibiting myself from doing that more if I find it to be more enjoyable than building a business. And so that's how I try to balance like doing what I think I enjoy today, but creating little options out there to find things that I could like more. Well, that was a great question from our listener. Shoot us an email again at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com, and we're going to continue answering questions throughout these episodes, or it'll just give us ideas for things to talk about in the episode. But I love this style of just like us chatting like we'd normally chat, and we just happen to be recording the show. Jesse, anything else before we sign off?
Nope. Have a great week, everyone. Keep grinding.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of The Crazy Ones. If you're an entrepreneur or a builder and want more great startup content, make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.